Hey, everybody out there. With us once again is Bryant Thomas. And once again, the discussion and probably the debate between us is between who wants to cut Social Security. Are the Republicans really aiming to eliminate or slash deeply Social Security, or is that just a Democratic talking point? Now, in the State of the Union address earlier this week, President Biden called Republicans out and says it's in a proposal on my desk. I could prove it to you that you're trying to cut Social Security, and he was roundly booed for that challenge by the Republicans who say it's all nonsense. Brian, is it nonsense?
No, it's not. The question is how committed they are to do it at this point. And I think Biden's got the political savvy to know that the Republicans don't dare do it right now after the drubbing they took in the past election in November. It would be political suicide. That doesn't mean they're going to give up on it. My suspicion is anything but the contrary. Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, has made a history of making sniping remarks at Social Security, and they resurfaced a video that he made in 2010 indicating that he wanted to get rid of it altogether, not just sunset it every 5 years, as the proposal from Senator Scott of Florida wants to do, but this guy wants to get rid of Social Security and Medicare altogether, and that's pretty much over the top.
Okay, Brian, there's been a whole history of proposals like that, but currently, what is on the president's desk that he was referring to? He said, I could show you the proposal on my desk. Is that Rick Scott's proposal about sunsetting it and renewing it every 5 years?
I don't know. I think the Scott proposal probably came out just before Biden's State of the Union address. So I don't know if they had time to incorporate that into Biden's remarks.
Okay, what would be wrong with sunsetting it and renewing it every 5 years?
Well, I think this is a bond that the United States government made with its citizens back in 1935. And this bond has not been broken only because people in Washington understood that it's a real bond that people made with their government about ensuring their economic futures when they retire.
A sacred bond, maybe. But okay, so what you're saying is that if they put through the sunset legislation, it has to be reviewed and renewed every 5 years, along with all other programs. It would be a way of either eliminating it or cutting it every 5 years until they whittle it down to a amount that wouldn't be workable for millions of senior citizens.
Well, and on top of that, if you have to sunset it every 5 years, then it becomes really attractive for Social Security and Medicare critics to go after this and for tooth and nail, and then settle for chipping away at it every 5 years, which is what I fear would happen if we go this route.
Okay, Brian, I brought this up before. All these polls showing that this is very unpopular to cut Social Security, even among Republican voters. So, do they dare to cut Social Security and make any moves towards that?
Well, here's the story. Remember, I told you that thing with my sister doing some outreach work in Florida when she moved there with senior citizens, and she soon found out that there are two classes of Social Security recipients in Florida. One who the group who relies exclusively on those payments to fund their living over the course of a month.
Right.
And the other get Social Security, but they also live on stocks and bonds and really don't care about Social Security because they don't need it. So it depends on where the sample is taken. If you go into a state like Florida where you have such a dichotomy of Social Security recipients, you might get a skewed result among people who are asked, do you care if Social Security goes bye-bye? So I think and same thing with Arizona. Those two states alone are probably going to give you a skewed result.
Yeah, but I mean,
Elsewhere, I don't think it has any traction at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what the article says, that it is disliked among Republican voters. Now, I think it's safe to say that considering the millions of people on Social Security, many of them Republicans, most of them are not among the elite financially, so they would be against cuts in Social Security, and they would have more clout than the minority of very rich Republicans who don't depend on Social Security. So again, if they were planning on doing this, is it really workable politically for them, or would it be political suicide?
I think it's stupid. And all you got to do is remember all of the lines about touching Social Security as the third rail of American politics. And I don't think that's changed. Now, having said that, you can go back and listen to people like Newt Gingrich, who once promised to put Social Security out on the vine to dry back in the early 80s. And I don't think there's any diminution in people who dislike Social Security in that group. I think they hate it. They've always hated it. They'll always hate it. So the question is how big this group is.
And the real question is, how would they be able to find a way politically to make these cuts or eliminate it? I mean, how would they do that realistically, considering all the cries against it from both Democrats and Republicans? Is it feasible for them to do it politically? How would they find a way to do that?
I don't think they can. I think this is just a lot of breastbeating at this point, only because many of the supporters of the Republican candidates in this past election are Social Security detractors. The big business people, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, you can go right down the list. The point is that if you're going to snipe at something, you've got to start early. And they see a chance to do this, lumping all of these government programs, such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, into one umbrella group. And nothing could be further from the truth. Social Security and Medicare are funded every time somebody gets a paycheck. Medicaid is indigent health care provided solely by the government for those people. That's
lumping them together as, quote, entitlements, which is
right. Medicaid is the entitlement. That's it. Stop there. Yeah. There's no other entitlement.
Yeah. Now, there had been proposals in the past. Maybe this is the way they could find a way to convince the public that there's a better option, which, namely, privatizing Social Security. That was floated some years ago, and that didn't go anywhere. But and the Republican argument then was that you do better off privatizing it, which means putting it out on the stock market, and the returns would be much better, which I think obviously is very risky because you can't guarantee a certain return like Social Security does. So that was floated. Maybe they'll try to bring that back in some way where they could distort the reality of whether it's stable or not. But what I'm saying is I think it'd be a tough sell no matter how they try to do it, because they already tried it with privatizing and it didn't work. So how could they actually get this through? You're saying they're going to find a way to do it. They'll snipe away one way or the other, and eventually they'll get to where they want to be. How would they do that?
Well, it's going to take victories in elections upcoming. And that's why Biden and the Democrats sense this as a golden opportunity to take this to the voters in 2024 and make this totally the issue, just like abortion was the issue in the last election. And
do you think it might backfire, though, if he keeps harping on this as a big campaign issue? I mean, it sounds like a great issue to bring up to pin the Republicans that you're trying to cut Social Security, but can they make that stick, or will it backfire and people will say, well, this is ridiculous. Republicans don't want to do that. So, would it be an effective approach to skewer the Republicans?
Look, Trump has proved that we cannot put stuff out on the vine and just call it truth when it's not. So I think the Democrats are going to be very cautious about over-promising on Social Security protection and making sure that what they do say about the Republican efforts is factual. Otherwise, you're right, it'll blow up in their face.
Yeah. So, Brian, just reviewing for the folks out there and maybe the younger people that are not that aware or concerned because, they're not yet anywhere near the age to collect Social Security, just how important it is for people once they become senior citizens. And is there anything realistically that could replace it?
Well, that's true. And you can take my retirement and your retirement as good examples of that. I was lucky enough to get a defined benefit pension plan and a 401k plan from the Associated Press where I worked. They've since stopped the defined benefit plan and gave people another form of retirement, but it's not nearly as generous. So when younger workers are told about retiring and they're in their 20s and 30s and they're in good health and they don't really think this is too far off to get worried about. They've got to be shown that yes, it is quick, and yes, your life will fly by, as a friend of ours in Waterbury once told us. And I think that it's got to be put in those terms that you've got to think about your own future every time you go into the ballot box. And if you want Social Security when you retire, then the last thing you want to do is keep voting for Republicans.
All right, next question, maybe a final question for this episode. How will they prevent it from going bust? How are they going to keep it solvent? So many studies have been done now that in another 12 years, unless something changes, some adjustment is made, it will go bust. How are they going to prevent that?
Well, look, there's a proposal now to remove the entire earnings cap on Social Security altogether. Right now, it's up to $164,000, something like that, starting this year. So above that level, Social Security is not deducted from your paycheck. It's also not matched by your employer.
Right.
So there's two schools of thought on that. People who earn big money don't want to see more of it go to Social Security, and their employers certainly don't want to see big increases in the amount of money they'd have to shell out because of the earnings cap being removed. So even though that's a quick fix for the deficit problems of Social Security, and it would fix most of them, by the way, 97% of the projected deficits in the Social Security Trust Fund would be fixed by removing the earnings cap. But they're going to have to settle for something less than that, I'm sure. It's.
Well, what is that? Less than that? What?
Well, you tell me. It depends on what else is on the table. If there's something really toxic that's part of this mix, then the chances of reaching a negotiation involving a higher retirement age and a higher threshold of deductions becomes less likely. So I think it depends on who the players are here. This year, it's not going anywhere this year with the Democrats in the Senate and Biden in the White House. Forget it. Nothing's going to change for the next 2 years, but they are setting the stage for beyond that.
All right. Now, when you say a partial fix, concerning the tax cap, the Manchin has a Democrat has proposed eliminated entirely. So even billionaires would be paying into it, even up to $1 billion of earning. You're saying it could be a cap raised somewhat higher, but not way the hell up so that even billionaires could pay.
Well, I don't know. Look, the actuaries at Social Security have figured this out a long time ago. And if you look at their annual reports, they tell you exactly what it would need to become solvent again. And, I think that the actuaries are usually pretty much on the money. The only question is that you know, critics of Social Security have always said the actuaries are the little boys who cried wolf. They don't, they just say this to get everybody all stirred up. And in the meantime, we've done nothing. So the hole in the Social Security Trust Fund is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you point out accurately that in 12 years, it's going to run out of money. And, you know, what do we do then?
And won't that put more pressure on politicians on both sides of the aisle to perhaps cut into Social Security if they can't find any other fix?
Well, it's a separate entity. It's not part of the federal budget per se. It's a standalone program. So that's why it takes congressional action to change the mechanism of Social Security so that it can be tinkered with politically. And that's the real problem. And that's why you see Scott trying to come up with sunsetting this type of legislation. That's the backdoor approach.
Now, by the way, there's some financial analysts who say that if you eliminate the tax cap, so even billionaires keep paying as they earn more and more, they would quickly find a way around that, dodges of that by moving stuff offshore or putting into different shelters, all that, not to show that much income. That would be easy for them to do, especially being all lawyered up, which financially they can do. So raising the tax cap so that even multimillionaires and billionaires would have to keep paying wouldn't work because they'd be wiser. They know how to dodge it.
Well, you know what? How about even raising it to $1 million a year? Leave the multimillionaires and the billionaires alone. You'd be surprised at how much more palatable this would become.
Well, even somebody making $1 million a year, I think, will go to his lawyer and say, you know, how can I avoid paying more for this? Whether it's workable or not, I don't know. But I guess we agree now that something has to be done before it goes insolvent in 12 years.
And it will. This is, you know, a self-fulfilling prophecy if nothing is done. And I think that that's important to point out again and again. And that's what the Democrats are honing in on for this 2024 election. Whether it resonates from now to November of 2024 is the big question.
Okay, we'll stay tuned. Bryant Thomas, most lately with the AP News Bureau in Washington, D.C., where he saw all kinds of maneuvers and machinations of politicians on both sides of the aisle. Thanks for being with us once again.
You bet.